I am joined today by Ryan McKesson, a seasoned sales executive with over 15 years of new business development and account management experience, coming up on his 10th year in IT consulting with Solution Design Group. A prolific writer and uplifting LinkedIn voice, Ryan is passionate about cultivating a strong network through authentic human connection, which I'm excited to talk with him about today. Ryan, thank you so much for being in my orbit and for joining me today on Cupalo Conversations.
Thank you. This is awesome. I'm stoked to be here.
Good. Well, I want to talk to you today about networking. Now, the word networking alone inspires thoughts of walking aimlessly and awkwardly around a hotel ballroom with the "Hello, my name is" sticker and a sweaty palm full of business cards. But I want to know, what does networking mean to you?
Ooh. I feel the same way. I think there's a stigma around networking. Even the word conjures up maybe the ballroom you talked about, or I think the worst connotation for networking is that it's selfish or something you need to do, something you do. I've shared this a lot too. Networking isn't something you do behind your job's back. It's something you do for your current role, obviously potentially for future roles and opportunities. But networking allows you to meet people from the future, people that have solved problems that you're trying to solve, people that are in roles you might want to be in someday. And so I certainly look at it as connection. I'm very fortunate I get to network for a living. And so I certainly have some sympathy too for people that find themselves in a place where they feel they need to network or they want to start to network. And I've moved off of we don't need to call it anything different. It's networking, right? I think we just we reframe how we think about it. And that for me is it's ultimately connecting. And I didn't coin this phrase, but I came up with it or related it to another sort of story I'd heard, but NATO networking, which is the acronym for not attached to outcome. And I think that's probably the one thing that's changed my whole perspective in the last couple of years of networking is just stop asking what's in it for me and stop assuming there has to be a transactional event that happens afterwards. And really just being curious to connect with people.
I love that. I think that does help too with, especially you and I both being in a sales capacity. We're sort of trained from the early days to be obsessed in a lot of ways with outcomes. But I find the best I've ever done is when I stop worrying about that and I just show up to the person in front of me, which I think you very much sympathize or relate to and share that ethos. So I love that NATO networking. Why should anybody network?
I think fundamentally we're social creatures, right? I feel like we learn and we grow when we connect. And the best experiences of my life have happened through quote unquote networking or opening myself up to meeting with people. And I think back to that, not attached to outcome. I stopped asking myself, why am I meeting with this person? What can I gain from this? And started asking, what can I learn? And even so, networking is tough too. And I had this thought a while back, networking brings up all the imposter syndromes, right? And I think early in my career, what held me back a lot was what can I offer? And you have this sense of oh my gosh, I have to have a network to offer a network, to build a network, to grow a network, to offer to my network. And you're just never going to get off the couch that way, right? And so I think fundamentally start asking myself, what can I learn by meeting with people? And that's changed everything for me. And so why should people network? They should to learn, to grow, to see what else is out there. People are fascinating, right? All of us have a completely unique human experience to anybody else in the world. And I'm fascinated by that. And so why should people network? To learn and grow and connect and ultimately to learn more about themselves.
You mentioned in an earlier conversation we had, and you've mentioned it in posts about this dreaded and yet all too familiar imposter syndrome. I'm wondering, do you still have to force yourself to remember that you too are somebody worth knowing, that you are unique and you're fascinating? Because what you are applying to others, I'm curious, do you struggle to apply to yourself?
If you're doing things correctly, imposter syndrome doesn't go away, because that means you're growing. That means you're putting yourself in rooms that make you available to grow, right? And so So yeah, like absolutely. And I've shared this, and I think part of what sent me down this sort of LinkedIn path of sharing my own networking journey and why I think it's valuable and important and wonderful was I was meeting with someone a year and a half ago, and she had shared with me like, oh, well, you know, networking must be so easy for you, right? You're an extrovert and you're so great with people, whatever. And it was like, oh my gosh, no, it is not. I still have to sit in my car before walking into a networking meeting and be like, gosh darn it, people like you, Ryan. Like, you add value, go get it, right? And I think it just dawned on me that what a disservice to make people believe that it's easy, because it's not. Meeting strangers isn't easy. Connecting with people isn't easy, but it's the most rewarding part of my life, let alone career. And so I feel like working through that, and then being aware of whether it's imposter syndrome or whatever you're nervous about, like it's part of the human condition, and working through that. And then, you know, you start to realize too, like your time and attention is one of the most valuable gifts you can give anyone. And so I might not be the most seasoned veteran in this industry, or I started thinking of like, what personally can I give to people? And that starts with my time and attention and listening and ultimately connecting.
So you brought us to that moment in the car right before a meeting where you're sweating bullets, you're about to walk in. Do you have that nervousness on LinkedIn to connect with somebody or via email, or is it just in the face-to-face type of dynamic? After all these years, do you still get nervous to reach out to a new person?
Yeah, for sure. I think we want to put our best selves forward and we want to connect. And, you know, what I have found, I think we talked about this last time too, but something that dawned on me recently as I've met more and more people that are starting to network and put themselves out there, that like getting quote unquote ghosted, like not getting a response. Now, you and I have been in sales for a long time. Like I've been getting ghosted my entire career, right? Like, and so I've found myself a little bit numb to it. And ultimately my reframe for that is like, people aren't mean, they're just busy, right? And so if I don't get a response from someone, I don't really dwell on it. Like I don't attach value to my personal human status because someone didn't get back to me. And I think I've always been prone to assuming positive intent.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think assuming, people are busy, which that I would love to talk about follow-ups, because I do think that's a big component to building a network and also just maintaining a relationship with someone. Let's go into LinkedIn, because I think that a lot of people, whether they're looking to find a job and they want to network with potential hiring leaders, or it's somebody who's looking to grow their team and they want to meet people who they can, hire, or it's somebody who just wants to connect with a like-minded individual, a colleague. So walk us through your process. I would love to know more. How do you go about connecting with someone for the very first time on LinkedIn? From the time you hit connect, what do you put in those 300 characters to what's your process for following up? I mean, this is something that everybody think could very much benefit from, regardless of what seat they're in.
I am a huge Brene Brown fan, and one of like my favorite sayings from her is "clear is kind," right? And I think on LinkedIn, like especially when you're trying to connect with people on LinkedIn, context is kind, right? Why are you reaching out? Is it because something I shared resonated? That's awesome. I love that. Like, let's connect all day. It's the blind ones that you sort of have to infer why they're trying to connect. I think everybody knows like the connect and then sell instantly is just cringe. Like that's the definition of cringe. And so ultimately, like LinkedIn is just a very powerful tool for connecting with people, right? I think one of the pieces too that I've always shared about LinkedIn is like there's no anonymity on LinkedIn. It is your profile, it is your picture, it is your career, it is your resume, right? And it's certainly slanting more towards social, and I love that. People are human, we're allowed to be human. All of my posts that are more personal tend to resonate more because it's true connection versus the robotic, here's what my company does, right? And so I think sharing, and back to that point about, I didn't want people to believe that networking was easy for me, because if someone thinks it's easy for me, then they have a tendency to think there's something wrong with them if it's not, right? And so if anybody in the universe goes like, wow, it's hard for Ryan, why wouldn't it be hard for me? Like, that's my message. Like, if you're an introvert, if you haven't networked in a long time because your head's down doing a great job at work and dedicated to your craft, like, it should be hard and possibly even more rewarding for you if you break through that.
Yeah.
So I do want to go back, like, so, obviously the sharing on LinkedIn, and I think where I ultimately got to is I've always been a reader. I've always been just fascinated with learning and growing. My biggest fear in the world is standing still or hitting some sort of plateau. And so I felt like sharing some of my process. I felt like sharing what I'm going through and what I'm working on. And I think, and then again, I think for me, the LinkedIn piece too is also very selfish. Like, it's a way for me to learn more. Like, the best way to learn anything is to teach it to other people. And I don't know if I'm teaching anybody anything, but I'm at least sharing ideas that resonate with me. And then that really ingrains it into my psyche, I guess.
Well, a lot of my network are software engineers, heads down technologists. And I think up until last year, they thought that a lot of people thought, and not just engineers, but that they didn't really need to have their brand being built in public. And a lot of people lost their jobs and then went, holy shit, I need a job now, and I'm one of 1,000 that's applying to this position. How do I stand out? And that's why I want to go back to how do you approach then for you connecting with somebody where it's like you must have a reason for why you're reaching out to them. Again, it might not be the end you actually anticipated. Are you keeping that open mind? How do you do that?
Yeah, it almost never is the end I had in mind, right? And so I'll share a story with you because I think a lot of the reason I want to connect with people is to learn from them, like especially people that are putting themselves out there. I've always been blown away by entrepreneurs like yourself that have the guts to go follow their passions and dreams and to learn. So one of my favorite stories from a little over a year ago, and she's a dear friend, Colleen Krantz. If you follow her as well, she's just phenomenal brilliant marketing person, and just even better friend. But I had reached out to her blind and just said, like, hey, we're connected to the same people, like whatever that message is, right? Like, hey, we have the same connections. We should connect. And just reached out to her, and we had the quintessential, and it was a video call, like awkward first 5 minutes, like, and she was sort of like, hey, like, what did you want? And I was like, I don't know. I want to be around you. I want to be in your orbit. Like, I want to learn. And that awkward sort of kickoff has led to one of the coolest relationships in my life in the last year, like, and just learning and passing ideas back, and obviously very like-minded in wanting to grow and share and connect. And to be honest, I think you and I connected this way. It was like, hey, like, love what you're doing out there. Like, let's jam and see where that takes us. And so I think, again, not being attached to what can this person do for me, and that especially, like, you mentioned the word authentic. Like, authentic was Webster's word of the year last year, which is ultimately like the number one word searched on Webster's website was authentic. And the year before it was gaslighting. And so, yeah, like the amount of contrast. And so there's two things in play there is like people are craving it, but people's like BS meters are also incredibly tuned in nowadays. And maybe that's a fear of AI or, but like, I heard this quote the other day, and I feel like it's the same with authentic, and it's in regards to respect, but it's like, when respect is like air, when it's there, you don't really notice it, but when it's not, it's all you can see or all you can feel, right? And I think authenticity is the same way. Like, when it's there, it's amazing, and when it's not, it's blatantly obvious. So I think trying to connect with people on a personal level has been fun, if nothing else.
What is your follow-up process? So you send that connection, and I do appreciate that you highlighted that you don't then go on to just, bombard them with a sales pitch, but you send the connection request, they connect with you. What's your process from there?
I love reading, and so I love sharing books with people. And I'm not giving out homework assignments. I'm not following up to say like, hey, what do you think about chapter 3, right? This isn't a book report. But it's, I just met this incredibly brilliant person, and he was sharing me about like his love for space travel, and like Project Hail Mary was one of the coolest books I've read in a bunch of years. It's super scientific, like all of it was over my head, and I could just imagine this guy reading it with such a cool passion and understanding that it was like, man, you should read this book, right? And so what that does is ultimately this person hopefully goes like, wow, like he listened to that part of my story where I love space travel and then shared something relevant. And that works on a personal level, works on a business level. Like, hey, you shared with me that your business is struggling with this problem or endeavor or trying to get through this challenge. Like, here is someone else who solved it. Or here's maybe how SDG has solved it for other customers, right? The relevancy is huge. But the follow-up just confirms that you were actually listening. And that's where the magic is. And I felt it myself. And I have people in my network that check in on me. And I love it. It feels great. It's to know that someone in the universe is thinking about you, like, that's cool. The other piece, and I've evangelized this a ton, but closing the loop. So I get introduced to a lot of people now, which is honestly the most flattering thing in my life, is when people have the confidence in me to provide a halfway decent experience to someone in their network, right? And so I don't take those lightly, and try to give my time and attention for those people. But closing the loop with the person that connected you has just blown my mind, because also as someone that I probably introduced 5 to 10 people a week to other people, and it rarely happens that somebody comes back and it's like, hey, like, and also somebody opened my, I'm a positive person. So I slant pretty positive and like, man, I want to hear if that was great, but it's also valuable to hear if that wasn't the right connection. Right. Like, and not that that person was terrible or bad, but like, hey, that's not the role I'm looking for. That's not the, feedback is valuable. And what I found too is, so if you introduce me to someone and I go meet with that person and we have a decent conversation, we have a great conversation, we have fun, like, learn something. When I come back and say, hey, Lauren, thank you so much for that introduction. It meant a lot. And it was a great conversation. I'm going to try to help them in this way or that way. You get an instant dopamine hit, right? Like, you go like, ooh, that feels good. And wow, it feels good to introduce Ryan to people. I want to do that again. And so ultimately, networking for me is building a community of people that want to see me win. And win looks different for everybody. It looks different for me at different times. But ultimately, I'm creating positive experiences for the people I interact with. And then again, that makes you feel good. And you go, oh, who else can I introduce Ryan to? Or and there's a massive amount, like, it's such low hanging fruit right now because nobody does it, or very few people do. So, and then keeping track of all of it is wildly entertaining. Is probably the best way I can describe it. But I've also been saying this a little bit too lately, and it's part of my process. But like, my goal is to make sure the 1 hour you spend with me today isn't the worst part of your day. Like, I want it to be positive. I want to pay attention and be here for you, right? And so I'm creating this ripple effect of positivity that makes me feel good, right? That to connect with people and spread that around. It's been really, really fun.
I love that. Well, I appreciate you sharing the follow-ups where you've established the connection and you ultimately are now keeping in touch with either a book recommendation or a reminder that this is how we connected. I think that's really great. What do you do when you hear nothing? So what's your process? How many times do you follow up before you become a giant pain in the butt? Or in your mind, that's sort of the threshold. And I guess what's the level of time that you allow to elapse between follow-ups?
I think ultimately it comes down to, like, do I truly believe I can help this person? Right? Do I truly believe that, specifically for SDG, can we provide something that they shared with me that I'm passionate about helping them solve? I don't know. I guess honestly, and I've not really thought about it a ton. But if you're genuine, here's one of my favorite sayings, and it's like, our SDG sales motto is intent trumps technique, right? And so you can have the fanciest slides, you can be the best presenter in the world, but if your intent is to get money in your pocket, you've already failed, right? And so if my intent is truly to give and to help, then there is no end to me trying to do that. Does it become a slower cadence? I think I've been maybe fortunate with how I've reframed things that I just don't ever take offense to it. But I think the follow-up, and I guess probably my better perspective is on the other side of it, right? When I don't follow up with someone that's trying to connect with me. And one of my other life goals is to create the least amount of, like, cringe moments when I see people, right? Like, we've all had that. And that's where I think I've always shared, remembering people's names is a superpower. Like, the people that we love the most are the people that, like, we enjoy encountering, like, are the people that remember us, right? And so even just remembering someone's name and you see them at an event, like, we all have had that feeling where you forget someone's name, right? And you see them and you're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Like, we're not at Starbucks. How do I figure out their name? And it's, for me, that's horrible. Like, that is the worst. And so I've worked really, really hard to remember people's names because I love giving them that moment that like I remembered them. And I know how it feels for me. I know how it feels the other way. And so part of like my mission for following up or doing what I say I will do and making the connections that I promise to make is to make sure that the next time I see that person, they're excited to see me. Right. And it's not like, oh, shoot, I forgot to do that thing. I owe you. And so that's obviously the other side of that coin. But for me, like if my intent is to help someone, then why would I ever stop? Like, I definitely feel like every organization that I call on for SDG, like I just haven't worked with yet. Right. There's definitely like, I will hopefully eventually, if what we provide and what they need aligns, then yeah, like why would I ever stop trying? And so, but if you're intent, again, and we all feel like the ickiness of people that are trying to take, right? There's takers and givers. And again, back to, I do believe everybody's trying their best. You know, and I've been in sales a long time. I've gotten the take me off your list, leave me alone. And I think I've just sort of worked through, it's like the scenario, right? Where somebody cuts you off on the freeway. Like my initial response is like, oh, I hope they get wherever they're going safely. Like, it's not like, oh my God, they saw me in the window and they have decided today is the day I'm going to teach Ryan a lesson that he is a terrible driver. Like, it's just sort of assuming positive. And so when people don't get back to me, I assume they're busy. Or, you know, obviously if I can try to understand, it's like, okay, did what I share not resonate? Am I missing the mark? Like, it's not, I have to evaluate why maybe someone isn't getting back to me, but I don't take it personally. And maybe like rejection gets easier every time. Right? But I think that mindset has helped me a lot in just giving people the benefit of the doubt. And that also for me is super selfish because life is way easier assuming people are trying their best versus they're out to get me. And I've shared this too, like, I don't think there's a scenario in the universe where if you send somebody a message and they don't get back to you, that they see it and they go, you know what, I'm going to teach Warren a lesson today and not respond. Like, nobody's thinking that way. Nobody's out to get you. And so full circle back, like if your intent is genuine, then your efforts are appreciated, I would say.
I love it. I definitely have a thing or two to learn from you when it comes to road rage, because while I assume the best when people don't show up to a meeting, I'm like, my first thought is I hope they're okay. If people don't respond to a message, I assume they're busy. But man, if someone cuts me off on the freeway, like I have to teach them a lesson. Now, I have learned I don't throw my middle finger up as often as I used to, but I still struggle with road rage. So I could learn from you.
No, and it's again, and this is all very selfish in that, like, I don't need that person to take any more space in my brain any longer, right? And that's obviously an example that goes across multiple different things and ways that people don't show up their best. And man, if the world has taught us anything in the last few years, like, it's a tough place. You know, nobody told me it was going to be this hard. Like, life, being a parent, navigating the economy the last few years, like everything, right? And so, and that's something you learn when you connect with people, is that everybody's experience, like, nobody's got it all figured out, and we're all trying our best for the most part. And you know what? The best part at the end of the day, like even on LinkedIn, like, we get to control who we spend our time with. I get to control who I follow on LinkedIn. I get to decide what content I consume and spend time with. And so for me, it's, you know, maybe I fail fast on people I don't care to spend time with. And I think that's a valuable exercise.
I agree. I do think we all have a lot of control. Sometimes we don't think so, and that's a problem. But I think we have incredible amounts of control what we filter in. You've talked about so many incredibly positive things about networking. I would love to know, because we all have a few, but you tell me yours, I'll tell you mine. What is the worst networking experience you've ever had?
Gosh, there's two come to mind, right? And I'll share both of them. because I 100% agree with you. Like, this isn't all rainbows. This isn't easy. But I had this one early on in my career where I met with someone and I had noticed that they were connected. You know, I'm trying to make these connections. Like, hey, I noticed you're connected to Aaron. And, you know, Aaron's a former customer of ours. He's a close friend. Like, we love him to death. You know, he's a big fan of SDG. And they're like, oh, yeah, he fired me from my last job. And it was like, oh, well, yeah, I'm not a huge fan either. Like, sorry. And so I do think it's important to understand. I was assuming that because she was connected to this person, that they had some sort of, you know, friendship or experience together, and just clank pretty bad. The other one was, I grant trust very quickly, right? I'd ran into someone I'd met a couple of times, and she was meeting with somebody else, and I went to go give her a hug and got like a full handshake, like, and I was like, oh yeah, I forget, like, we're not there yet. So that one was pretty bad, but
those are great. Well, I appreciate you sharing those. I've had the handshake one, my favorite. I'm a hugger too, and so especially my favorites, you go in for the handshake. They grab the hand, but then you still get the hug too, and the hand is pressed between you and them, and it's never placed well. But my worst experience actually happened last year. I am part of this women's networking group, and it's a national group here. And I met this woman through it online. Like, we're in the same group, but she's not local. And she's like, oh, I know somebody I think you should meet, also in staffing or the career space. I'm not exactly sure, but I'll make an intro and you two should talk. Great. That's very normal. That happens all the time in this networking group. She sends an email intro, and I learned the woman is in like career development. She's a career coach. And so makes an intro. The woman responds, happy to meet with you, Lauren. We set up a time. I kid you not. We get on this call, and the woman goes, I just want you to know before we start, I did not give my consent for that initial intro email to go out. I don't appreciate that. And I was like, well, you agreed to take this meeting. I didn't know that was not okay. Yeah. We can just end right here. She goes, no, I just don't know why we're meeting. Like, well, I don't really at this point either. You know, I think we should just probably end. She goes, no, like, are you interested in the space? Like, what are you talking? So I had to just kind of like muddle my way through an explanation, and then I quickly got off that call. But it was one of the worst. It was so awkward. Here I am. I show up all excited, like, we're gonna just talk. Maybe I'll send her business. Hell no. I mean, that's the other thing that makes me laugh is like, I could send people her way who are looking for a career coach. Never.
Yeah. And again, like, maybe a bad day, rough, but I think more importantly, like, that's again where context is kind, right? Like, what is the context? And I'm wildly unorganized. And so when I say I don't love agendas, that's probably just because I don't know how to do one. But I think sharing the context of why I want to connect with someone, and that was, you know, one of the ones I shared. And I do want to get back to, because probably the biggest eye-opening thing for me with the networking over the last year is how important it is to be open to receiving, right? And I definitely struggle with asking for help. I am a grinded out of the dirt type of, like, I solve my problems by myself, and it's just not a great exercise. But I think being open, and one of the things as I've built my network, and I'm very prideful of how much effort I put into fostering a network and growing it and making all these friends, that when people ask me to leverage my network, it feels awesome. Like, it is the coolest feeling when somebody goes like, hey, you probably know this person. Could you make an introduction for me? Right? We got to grind through, like, what's the context and why and how, and do I really know this person very well? But I've just, having been asked for help so much over the last year, it makes me realize, like, that's a gift that people give me by asking me to leverage this network I put a lot of effort and energy into. And so when we don't allow people to help us, it's a disservice. And it's still a work in progress, right? I'm from California. I've been in Minnesota for 15 years, and I have fully adopted the, like, oh, but if you don't need to, or if you don't want to, like, please, like, I inherently put the out in there as well. But again, I think people understand my intent at this point, and I've built up some, I think, equity in that I'm not creating miserable experiences for people when I'm asking to connect. And then that's part of that follow-up, right? Is you're confirming that hey, this was a good connection and I appreciated it. And maybe that's it too. Like we're all starving for appreciation, and it's not, these things are simple, but not easy, right? It's really easy to sort of just keep plugging along and moving forward. But to take the time to follow up with people and close that loop is huge. And so I've certainly gotten better at asking for whether it's help or connections, and but also that has taken some effort to get through my own whatever imposter syndrome or fear. And at the same time, like we all know, like none of us know everybody in our LinkedIn networks, right? Just because I'm connected to someone doesn't mean we have breakfast every other Tuesday. And so, but and multiple times to me, it's happened like, hey, I don't really know that person. It's like, oh, cool. Like I'll try someone else. That full circle again, back to like, if my intent is genuine, then my effort seems worthwhile to continue to try to connect with that person. And a lot of the times I'm blown away by what they're sharing or what they're doing. And from a sales perspective, I'm the utmost belief in what we do at SDG and how we serve people. And this is one of my favorite things from an SDG perspective is, a lot of our business comes from referrals, and a lot of it over the last few years is we worked with someone over here and now they've landed over here and they want to work with us. And what I've heard multiple times now is that not only do they want to work with SDG because they need to solve massive problems that they've got going and they need to, digital transformation or whatever it is, but they're also excited to introduce our team to their team. And that means the world to me, right? And so these customers that keep coming back to us are coming back to us because their teams love us, because the work we do and the way we do it. And that's super validating and been a lot of fun.
Yeah, those referrals, they're the biggest compliment, whether to your point, it's being the super connector for somebody else, or it's being, a business partner for life for somebody. So I think both of those, it is really important that the person you're in front of could be someone that you're in front of for the rest of your life in different, contexts. And I love that you've shared a lot of wonderful insights. My last question to you today as we wrap up. What is top of mind for you for 2024?
Ooh, it's a great question. I appreciate it. It's for sure my main focus right now is SDG, and we have some phenomenal people to find opportunities for, right? And so helping my customers solve problems with the people that we provide is definitely a main focus, right? I love connecting with people. I love helping them. I won't ever stop that. I've always done that. But I think a main focus is evangelizing my teammates that I work with that are incredible developers, project leaders, creative designers. I had this question this morning at a networking event. What did you want to be when you grew up? And mine was a sports agent. Like, saw Jerry Maguire super early in high school, right? But even before that, and I ultimately, the way I describe my job to my mom is I'm a sports agent for IT people. And I get to evangelize these incredible people that work for SDG and share their stories and try to find them their next team to work on. And super passionate this year about finding more of that for us.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Ryan. I am so grateful for everything you shared today. I have a lot to learn from you, not just, tempering my road rage, but I think you've further validated a lot of the things that I think are just, I hate to say it, but to your point, they're simple, not always easy to do, but dynamics of human connection. And I really value all of the tips and tricks, but truly how there are some systems in place that you've organically adopted, and it's how you show up authentically in the world as well. That's a really great, beacon of hope and example for lots of people. So thank you so much for being in my orbit, for joining me today on Cupalo Conversations.
Thank you.